What's up, DAW Nation? Welcome to another week of In The DAW, and in this week's episode, we are with Au5, and he's gonna be breaking down his song that he did with Nytrix called Always in a Nightmare. Now, this song is a sequel, okay? We've actually broken down the other sequel, which is Only in a Dream. We did that about a year ago, so you should totally go check out that episode as well. But what are you gonna learn in this week's episode? You're gonna be learning about using Zynaptiq Morph as a vocoder. What? That's a thing? It's totally a thing. We're gonna talk about it. Second thing that we're gonna talk about is the importance of a flow state. Why is it important to be able to get into your DAW and just immediately tap into that flow state and just go and just create as fast as possible? Why is that important? How can you do it? We're gonna talk about it. Third thing that we're gonna be talking about is resampling your own songs. What? Taking your own songs, repurposing them, making more stuff. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It's the only gift I want. But I never get it. Anyways, so we're gonna teach you how do you resample your old songs? How do you take things you already made and make something new out of them? We're gonna be talking about it. The fourth thing that we're gonna be talking about is how to make emotional bass music. All right, bass music has become so unemotional, so just head banging. There's no emotion tied towards it. Well, guess what? We're gonna talk about how to infuse that emotion back into it. And there's no one better than Au5. If you're new to the channel, if you're new to the DAW Nation channel, welcome for the first time. This is a series where we interview huge music producers that come and dissect their songs in real time. It's beautiful. If you wanna keep learning from producers that are actually doing it, right? Not people that are trying to recreate what those producers are doing, but you get to learn from the producers themselves, then go ahead, go hit the subscribe button, hit that little notification bell. We'd love to hear from you in the comments, hit that like button, do whatever you need to. We'd love to hear from you. But DAW Nation, with all that out of the way, there's one more thing that I need to tell you. Au5 and I just released a new course. It is called the Serum Masterclass. It is where Au5 and I go into Serum and we show you how to do every single little thing inside of there. Every knob, every menu, everything inside of there is explained, all right? No stone is left unturned. You get to learn everything inside of Serum, and we also teach you our advanced techniques, things that took years to figure out, all right? So if you want to truly master Serum, if you want to learn everything inside of there, you want to learn all the advanced techniques that Au5 has learned, that I've learned, right? And you want to have it in a nice, beautiful little package, well, guess what? You can head on over to dawnation.net and check it out over there. Also, there is a link down in the description as well, okay? So if you want to check out the Serum Masterclass, again, go ahead and click the button below to check that out. But DAW Nation, with all that said, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and ask, big, beautiful boy, Ben. Lots of hearts around my face right now. Come on, Ben, give them to me. Anyways, let's go ahead and ask Ben to take us in the DAW with Au5.
In the very beginning, it's just Nytrix stems. So before I play this, originally this started out as just him sending me an acapella and me writing the song to the acapella, and very similar to how Only in a Dream started out. Once I, developed most of it, the drop, and fleshed out the whole song, then I sent him some reference stems, and then he rearranged them and then created his own stems and really just extended the verses out a little bit more and just made them really cinematic. I'm gonna play from the beginning and you're just gonna hear his contributions. So we got this little synth right here. It's kind of like Only in a Dream. First of all, these vocals. I have quite a bit of processing going on these vocals. Vocals without any processing. Very clean, very dry stem that he sent over with some stacks. I didn't really have to do anything to fix up or clean up the vocals that much at all. Really, this vocal chain, simple low cut filtering. I have a dynamic EQ for some mid-rangey peak stuff. Yeah, that fundamental. I had a soothe going on, but it's a CPU killer. It's mainly just doing more of what the dynamic EQ is doing, just taking out those low-end resonances.
How much do you know about Soothe? Are you pretty knowledgeable of it?
Yeah, I think I understand it completely.
What do you do with Soothe in this kind of instance? Do you just throw it on there and that's it? I mean, what do you specifically tweak on that?
In this instance, I'm not really that concerned with like the sibilance frequencies, which is sort of what this was geared towards. I'm more concerned about like the mid frequencies that really peak out. So basically, my approach to this is use this in a way where it is kind of like a multi-band compressor, but specific to certain resonances in the mid-range. And the reason why is because when I compress it afterwards and do some multi-band saturation and more compression, it preserves the air, the top-end breathiness, when you can reduce specifically the mid-range harmonics and leave the top-end harmonics. It doesn't really sound that much different because it's a very transparent processing. It's pretty subtle. It's getting rid of these. I just figured it wasn't really necessary. The amount that I'm cutting is pretty subtle. It's mainly just to keep the compression and the multiband saturation and such just kind of steadier, like not working so hard and not getting as much distortion or it just keeps everything really steady. I added Soothe afterwards after I made this whole chain, and I figured that like right here was the most appropriate place to put it. That sounded good.
It is a CPU hog, but Soothe 2 now I think they've cut their CPU hoggage in half.
They did, yeah. I got that too.
It's now full band. Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
I would totally have used Soothe 2 if they had it back then.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, so I made this song the first week that I moved into this house. So that was August. Yeah, this is actually the most ideal amount of time because it's like, it's not rushed. It's not forever to the point where it's like, okay, this doesn't sound fresh anymore. And it's enough for where I can like sit on it and really fine tune all the things, like add Soothe and stuff.
From Only in a Dream to Always in a Nightmare, has there been any developments in how you process your vocals as opposed to before then?
Well, I didn't have Soothe back then. That's one thing. It's interesting with vocals because every vocalist sounds different and even every take sounds different. There really isn't a go-to like vocal chain that I use for everything. I build it from the ground up every single time and I just use my ears and see like what's appropriate. I'm sure that there are things that I am doing differently, but I can't really recall anything off the bat because it's pretty much improvised every time I process a vocal. It's like I just do it from the ground up and just do step by step. All right, it needs this, and this. And I'm basically just sculpting it, and it's totally dependent on what it is that I get initially.
You're basically, the voice being an instrument, everyone having a different voice, you're basically manipulating and processing a different instrument every time you have a new vocal.
It's the most dynamic instrument. I just want to bypass everything and go through each thing and then demonstrate like what it's doing. So here's the vocal just totally dry. First thing, cutting out the low end under 100, multiband dynamics. Soothe, ping pong. New compressor for stability. This next thing, I don't think I'm actually using just yet. Nope. Oh. So yeah, this next thing, I am using a plugin called Morph. And so actually at the very top of my session, I have these chords, and the track isn't muted. I just have the volume to negative infinity, and I'll explain in a second. These chords are just following the chord progression. And what I'm doing is I'm using that track as a carrier signal if I'm creating like a vocoder-like effect, but I'm using Morph, and this is an amazing plugin. Basically, I'm gonna solo this and you can hear what it's doing. I have that first track sidechain routed to the Morph plugin. And if I just solo this, check this out. It's like the cleanest vocoder ever. It's like no artifacts, no weird top end stuff. It's like super clean. The reason why I have that at the top is because I'm not just using it on vocals. Later in the session, I'll show you what else I am morphing with those chords.
Oh, I know what's going on here. Keep going though.
So yeah, there's morph going on, making the vocoder effect. It sounds like this. Very subtle. And then I have utility, the makeup gain. And then I have from the School of Bass course, the multiband saturator. And this isn't actually doing anything just yet, but I have these automated for later. I have an OTT that's also being automated. It's just compressing everything. And then a little bit more multi-dynamics. Some of that low stuff. It's low, like low mids are really tough to get right with vocals. It's like just a couple dB too much and the vocals sound like weird and muddy and bloated, or like karaoke-esque effect, and just a couple dB too little and it's just like sounds really hollow and dry. So it's like, it's really important to get your low end of the low mids of your vocals really steadied and just perfect.
You almost have to you can like brick wall them, that like multi-band brick wall, that little area, just to keep them tame sometimes with certain, especially with the singer, if they're very low in their chest, that's tough to tame.
Especially if they're really dynamic too, like if they're singing loud parts and quiet parts. It's pretty much, if you can just like put a limiter on just the fundamental and like the first two harmonics, you should be good. And then the last thing I have automating on is another harmonic exciter, because when the drop hits, everything gets really loud and it's really fighting and you want the vocals to really cut through. I'm using a couple more techniques to make them cut through. But all right, I'm gonna move on from vocals. These keys down here, this is just a layer of Omnisphere. Loading. It's called Crush Tone Keys. It's just a preset. And then I'm also using Diva, and this one is called All Aboard by, I don't know, 3EE. And combined, it's really cool. Like, kind of synthy, kind of like natural sounding keys. See, that's that part. Break, Nytrix stems. So if I solo the Nytrix stems, you'll hear what's going on. He's doing the vocal ambience and this synth. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what that is. It's a really nice sound though. And what I got going on up here is, if I mute these, I have these phasery chords. This is Gladiator, actually. And I'm using the phaser effect. It's just two sols with analog spirit mode. And some low pass and some reverb. And this lead right here, this is just an operator, just a filtered square wave, going through some erosion, some delay, a hollow vintage verb, and then EQ. I just thought they combined really well.
So melodically, was it that he just sent over the vocals and now you're just creating things melodically to help fit whatever the vocals are doing?
So he sent over the vocal a cappella and he had a totally different chord progression. I wanted it to be a chord progression that was a little more consonant sounding. His was very like a little more, I guess, orchestral. There was a lot of modal interchange and stuff going on, and I was like, I feel like if this was just simplified and more consonant and more like a pop chord progression, just a simple 4-chord thing, it would really push the track much further. And so I reharmonized chords to his vocals that I found befitting, which were these chords, the da 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 da. And then once I get those chords down, then it's like everything else starts coming in. I'm just like, okay, here we are. The space is lit up. I know. It's like I have a map now, compositionally speaking. This bass drone, this is just Harmer. I'm using crude low pass, and it's like 75% saw wave. It's just a detuned saw, a little bit of square, and then crude low pass. And it kind of gives it that like really nice resonance around like the 400 hertz area. Yeah, Harmer is incredible. This isn't too big of a thing. I am using cinematic percussive effects from Symphobia Orchestral Essentials, and then this little chime thing. Oh, and also Action Strikes hits for this impact. I love that one. It's so thick. Then the next part, things get interesting. Moving forward, here's the chorus.
Without you, I'm always in a nightmare without you.
So starting from the top, I got some cymatics hi-hats coming in. Just fading in. Just get the rhythm going. Bring the energy up. A little effects. I think these are... Yep, these effects are from a pack called Motion Pulse. They're cinematic sound effect pack. It's not geared for like music production, but I mean, why not? Yeah. This little guy here, this is just a... What is this thing? Is it just a white noise riser? This is interesting. Let's see what's automated. So I'm automating the pitch envelope. Here's something interesting. With Operator, you can't really just automate transpose and have it not be steppy per semitone. So something I discovered is if you set the pitch envelope to sustain and peak to the same value, you can just use the pitch envelope to smoothly go through and do pitch bends that way. So it's not steppy. And this is just some random FM stuff with some noise. I'm just making a simple riser, nothing too elaborate. Yes, this is where I add the harmonic exciter onto the vocals to just brighten it up, really make it present. So without... You can really hear it in these top two bands. It's actually pretty noisy, but it gives the illusion that they're brighter than they actually are spectrally, and it helps just cut through better. Moving down, we got some chords. Ah, yes. So I'm using just Gladiator for this. This is just one that I made. It's just initialized from 2 sols, and then it's basically the same pad as before, except I'm using the filter envelope to pluck it. I'm also using an arpeggiator with just the same MIDI. This is just a really easy way to just take chord pads and then to just make them pluck at 8th notes is just use arpeggiator with chord trigger.
From what I'm understanding from doing all of the everything I've ever done with you is that you basically never have a system. It's just you always hear things, or you know something needs to go there, or you hear something in your head and then you try and do it. Is there ever a time when you actually do have a system and you're like, okay, in this instance, I know I need to do X and then Y and then Z? Is there ever any time like that?
You're talking about like compositionally?
Anything, like production, compositional, melodic, like anything. Because everything that I understand from you is it's always been like, I don't know, I feel like this needs to be here and I know how to achieve that thing. But like you're always just kind of like listening and like, I feel like this should be here. I feel like I should do that. You know what I mean?
That's a good question. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because like right now I'm totally in like analysis mode, and it's not really thinking of like what was my thought process with things. And it's a really hard thing to try to explain. The reason why is because if I'm in the flow and just like making stuff, the next day I don't remember most of the things that triggered my impulse to do something. Like I don't know, man, it's really intuitive. It's almost like I get into just like I get into a flow state. Would you say? Yeah, tunnel vision. I lose track of time. I'm not self-aware. I just go and go and go until next thing I know it's sunrise, or like I can't keep my eyes open. Like as far as all these decision-making processes go for this song, I knew that I had a rough idea, because like I knew that I wanted to do something similar to Only in a Dream, because it's a sequel to it, of course. That it was just a very general guideline. Like I want atmospheric intro, and then something that is like feels trancy and builds up, and then, you know, just hit him with the crazy bass. But besides that, there really isn't any. I can't really tell you why I made the decisions that I made. It's just something that when I hear a really inspiring vocal and a really nice chord progression that works with it, it's just like a whole world opens up, and I'm just like, it's like being out in nature, like exploring the mountains. It's like I'm not really thinking analytically of like, should I go here? Should I go here? What would be the best course of action? It's just like, as long as there's nothing immediately threatening, I'm just going with the flow, dude. I'm just like, that sounds like a fun place to explore. Let's go check it out. Put it down. If it works, then just move forward and just keep doing it. Keep exploring.
Why do you think it's like that? Do you think it's like that just because you've been in the DAW so freaking much? Like you've tried so many things, you know, like when something tickles your fancy, you know, hey, there's something there. I gotta do that. Is it like you just have so much experience, you know when to listen to that kind of inner voice kind of thing?
I would say so. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing in the DAW is second nature at this point, just from repetition. I guess it's like kind of when we speak, our native language, it's like we're not thinking about the words that we say. Most of the time, we're not thinking about the words that we say right before we say them. We just kind of know the feeling of what we want to convey, what kind of, the abstraction and the meaning of what we want to communicate. And then we just kind of just like we just say one word, and then from there, everything kind of just pieces itself together. It's kind of like that. And I would say someone who's learning like a foreign language, initially, it's like you have to think about everything that you're saying and make sure that it translates. But eventually, when you get fluent with it, it's almost like all of that analytical processing becomes encoded as like an algorithm in your brain, and you're not actually using conscious energy to tap into that. It's just purely subconscious. Those synapses or those neural pathways are very well tread, and those synapses are easily triggered and lubricated. And it's just like there's not a lot of resistance when it comes to that. It's like I hear something and I already have a feeling of like, oh, I want to reach for this plugin, and I'm already like seeing chord shapes in my head and like where the chords and the rhythms would be placed. It is a very intuitive process, I would say.
What you're saying is not foreign to people who actually have like that are bilingual, for example. So it's cool that you brought that up. So like when I was learning Spanish back when I was 19, I remember my Spanish teacher teaching me that, which was, like if he said the word hola, what actually happened in my mind at that point was I take hola, I'd translate that into English, which means hello, and then I would recognize that. And then at that point, it's like, okay, they're saying hello, right? But it was basically a two-step process. Eventually, after speaking Spanish for so long, instead of going to the English translation and then me understanding it, it bypassed the English translation and just go to me understanding it, right? And it's kind of, from what I understand, is what you're saying here is instead of it going into a two-step process, it's just going from you feel something, you immediately know how to apply it, boom, and you just keep moving like that. Is that correct?
It's mostly like that, yeah. I mean, because we have so many different options and instruments to choose from, though, I mean, there's a fluctuation. It's a rapid fluctuation between like certain things, like what kind of tool do I want to use for the job? Like I know what kind of tools I can use, and I'm already gravitating towards, my brain is already filtering out. It's like, you're going to use these, but it's like, which one of those? And then, I'll pick one for whatever reason seems to be the most interesting or the most stimulating at the time. And then once I'm in that, and it's something that I'm familiar with, like Serum, for instance, then it's like, I'll just go through the motions. It's like, it's mostly just like, all right, intuitive following my gut. And then there are opportunities where it's like, okay, Austin, let's make an analytical decision real quick and then go back into the flow. But I would say all that entire process is part of the flow. It's just the left-right brain communication. It's like a dialogue. It's like me and you talking. It's like we can chime in whenever we want, and the conversation still continues. It's not like, oh, I didn't expect you to chime in, and now I'm like, I have no idea where we're going or what we're talking about or what we're doing. Why are we doing this kind of thing? It's like we're kind of acting as one mind at this point, one unit. Even though we're two separate people, have different ideas, bouncing things off. It's like the flow still remains, and it's not broken. And it's, the compositional process, or just producing as a whole, it's kind of like that between the analytical and the intuitive sides of me.
Just to add to that, I think one thing that from listening to you two talk about it is that it's also something that comes with time.
Absolutely.
Like you've been, like I can see in your racks and stuff that you have stuff that is labeled from things that you've already made. Like I'll make my own racks and stuff like that, and you have all your own racks, and it's just like you've become so efficient at what you're doing that you can attribute a lot of that to being able to keep yourself in that state of flow. So like I know exactly what you mean. You work on something, and maybe the first little while you're just kind of getting into the thick of it, but once your mind is tuned in, you just do what you're feeling. And I think that's actually where some of the best music comes out of.
That's why I think the whole like bass design jam method is so efficient for most people, because it is that you're keeping yourself in the flow, because you're exploring stuff, or you're exploring stuff, new things in a sound design session. And then you save that, you have a better understanding of synthesis or the processing or whatever you created, and then that's just kind of a thing in your repertoire now. Like not just like your sample or preset repertoire on your computer, but it's like in your mind. If you are to synthesize something create something, do sound design again, and stumble upon certain things that you discovered while fully focusing on just exploring sound design for a bass design jam, you're just going to become much more efficient because you've already done it. It's just learning your tools, and it's not just learning the tool, but it's learning how you interact with the tool, the relationship that you have with the synths and the effects. It's like that's why everyone's approach is a little bit different.
Like what do you gravitate to when you're inside, let's say Serum? You're always gravitating toward basic shapes and FM, and then then you're using certain filters or whatnot, and you just know because like that is what you like and that's what works for, I guess, your particular sound. So
And for whatever that is, like that could be for many reasons. It could be, that was one of the first things that you saw in a tutorial. And so that's like your go-to thing. It's like the easiest thing for your brain to just go to. It's the most familiar thing. Or it could be like the interplay between your mind and the tool. The tool is its own thing, but you put that tool in front of other people and they're going to get different things out of it. And they're going to consistently have, they're with enough iterations of people doing that, you're going to start seeing what people gravitate towards. Not just what they're familiar with, but also what it is that what they like what they actually enjoy hearing the most out of something. And I think that's where the voice emerges.
like your signature sound, essentially.
Mm-hmm. It's a combination of what you like with what you're familiar with, I would say. So what did I cover? Oh yeah, the Gladiator pads, Chords, just arpeggiator, mid-side OTT. And then some EQ. We don't need that low end. Because we have the bass. Real quick, I got this thing going up here. Just like from Only in a Dream, just the square arpeggio or the square operator pluck. And then tubular bells. This is a, I think this is actually a sample from a really old Logic EXS24 pack that I imported into here. I've been using it for, over a decade at this point, and I just love the sound of tubular bells. It's like impacts. And then we got down here, we got a, that was such a fun arp to make. So this is a preset that I made. I tried to emulate like what I thought the ultimate keytar sound was. Like not too cheesy, not too like noisy or messy, just something that's like right in the middle, something that sounds like guitar. And it's mostly from the amp. I mean, without the amp, the amp and the cab. I'm using a PWM wave and some bandpass filtering with an LFO. So it kind of has that evolving, almost like wah filter effect. And then once you amp it, it's gonna be kind of harsh. But then throw the cab on it, and then it sounds like, it sounds like a thing in the real world now. A little bit more. Some reverb, OTT. And this ARP is just, it's following the chord progressions, but I'm adding a lot of, what are they called? I'm adding a lot of extensions in the chords. Like if this was a chord, it would just be like, but yeah, I'm pretty much just going through the scale of each chord, just going all the way up and then down. And basically what I do is how I make this. So this is all 16th notes. I'll just go all the way up until I hit the bar line, and then I will select all these, duplicate it out, and then hit reverse, and then it'll bring it back down. And that's just a fast way to do that. And then if I have like some if I have some passing chords, then I'll change the notes where the chord progression changes so it fits. I do most of this by ear, but like this last phrase right here, if I combine the chords, let me extend this out a little bit, you'll hear what I'm talking about. Like these last notes are different than these. This is the sixth chord, and that's the sixth scale degree of this is the root of that chord, the sixth chord, and then it ends on the 7 chord, because as you can see up in here, it goes from 6, 7, and then 1, which then drops down to. But then this turnaround here. I wanted to give it that harmonic minor, half diminished effect, because this is the major 5 chord, or the harmonic minor dominant chord, whatever you want to call it. And I just thought these notes are just really appropriate for that. It gives it that like,
It's like ominous.
yeah, ominous, like more cinematic, orchestral, classical vibe to it. I don't like to use it often, but when I do, it's like just occasional and like here and there. It just gives it that little taste, especially when it's like preparing for the rise, which is the next part. It's just, there's so much tension to move to that tonic, and nothing better than a dominant 5 chord. For the basses down here, oh wait, real quick, this lead. This is the same melody that's going on this operator, except this is a cool Diva preset that I modified called XS MIDI Trance Lead, I believe it's called. MIDI Trance Lead. It's really cool. I love it. And just a little bit of processing, EQ, and reverb. Yep, more Harmor for bass. And I am using just a low pass filter. So here's what I'm doing with this bass. This is probably the cleanest Supersol pluck bass that you can make. How I do this is, first of all, because Harmor is an additive synth, you can do pretty extreme filter enveloping, and you're not going to get any detuning because it's not going to change. There's no phase rotation in the filters because they're not audio filters. They're spectral filters. It's just math. So you can do like really steep plucks and have it be perfectly in tune. But what I'm doing here, as you can see, this isn't actually a saw wave. This is basically a sawtooth wave with the fundamental removed. And what I do is if you right click or if you click on this, you can actually see the full spectrum. Right now, it's just a flat line because all of the harmonics, except if you zoom into the very beginning, you can see right here, if you look up in this little info box right there, if I hover my mouse over it, you can see what harmonic it is. So that's the first harmonic, that's the fundamental, that's removed, I completely removed that. The second harmonic is also completely removed, but the second harmonic is a little bit present. I have it ramped up so that by the third harmonic, you could see in the spectrum over here. Well, you can't actually see the fundamental, but you can hear if I bypass this B part, there's no fundamental. And the reason why I do that is because when you add unison and detune it slightly, you're going to get an unstable sub. It's just going to be random and phasey. So we cut that out, and then what I have for B is basically the same exact thing, but inverted, which in this case is practically just a sine wave without any unison. You get the perfect pluck. The sub is, it's just a super solid sub. And then there's no pitch deviation because of phasing issues, which is great. That's why I love Harmor for bass, particularly.
In terms of Harmor, I saw that you had, is there anything like alternative that you were using prior to that you thought was like kind of cutting it close, or were you just like night and day with Harmor? Because I know it's, for some people, they can't get it on their...
So I would say the alternative to Harmor, you can use Razor. Razor is really similar. The only issue with Razor is for doing something like this, you're going to probably need to, if you want to do unison, you can do unison in Razor. It's a different kind of unison though. It's actually a spectral unison, which is different than Harmor. Harmor's unison is like an analog unison because it processes the signal after it's already converted to audio and then just revoices that with different detunings. Razor's unison is actually spectral, so it sounds different. It doesn't sound as thick and warm. You could probably totally get away with it though, just by using like Serum Effects Hyperdimension and create like a fake unison. The only other issue with Razor for really low basses is it doesn't have as much of a high-end extension as Harmor does because it doesn't utilize as many sine wave partials. However, you can totally hack that. I actually do have you may have seen it, the Razor hack tutorial. You can get unlimited partials. So that shouldn't be an issue anymore because that's free info. If you don't have Razor, but if you have like the full version of Reactor, there's also another plugin called Laser Bass. It's like a precursor to Razor and Harmor. You can get very similar effects, but yeah, it's got periodic filters, and because it's all additive, you're going to get super clean filtering sounds without any pitch deviation. So yeah, I would say those two. I can't really think of any other one. You can also create a linear phase pluck in Serum by resampling a regular filtered pluck into a wavetable and then resetting the phases so that you don't have phase drift. But that's a whole other thing, and that has its own issues. But I would say the closest thing to Harmor, if you can't get Harmor, is Razor. Equally awesome of a synth, I think. Cool, moving on. What is this effect? Yep, that's another motion pulse effect. Yeah, motion pulse, it's
I
awesome.
like the sense of space that one creates.
Am I doing any processing to it? A little bit of EQ. So yeah, that's that. Let's see what we got here. Start from the top, actually. So I have these China crashes. Perk. Yep. So this is where the drums really start to come in. There is a lot of stuff going on this drum rack.
You don't say.
So for the kicks, I'm using Kick 2, which I covered before. It's pretty awesome. And yeah, just pretty much just making my own shape. And for the click, there's this artist who makes some really, really dope bass music who goes by Famous Spear. He's probably one of my favorite dubstep artists in the game. His stuff is just so clean and futuristic and huge. I took probably a 30 millisecond clip of one of his songs and snagged the transient just because it's so good. I use that as a layer, so.
Pay the man.
You should check him out.
He's amazing.
Cool, point proven. So this next thing, so the snare, I'm using Kick 2 as well. And I have actually the snare from Blue I have in here with it just adds a little bit of noise, dude. It's such a relic. And then I have this other one called Daka Norsha snare. I won't explain the name, but it's a combination of two songs of mine. It's a combination of two snares from two different songs of mine that just blend together really well. Sounds like that. And then just those layered together. It's just pretty nice. Moving forward, I have a rise from my song Virgo. And I'm just stretching that out and using texture. I use this in almost every song and modify it in some way. It's just a nice tonal rise. Tubular bells. Yep, trance lead. And now here's where the basses start creeping in. So this bass actually, this is a wavetable from a sound that I made a long time ago. It was in a stem from my song Dream of Love, and I just resampled it and just modified some stuff. I mean, without the filter, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in this sound. A lot of it's also bypassed too, but pretty much sounds like this. And then EQ filter compression. And then this is the same thing except squarified. And I'm just mixing it in 50-50. So I'm getting some odd harmonics. Gives it a little bit more of a smoother, hollower sound. Filter. I don't know why I'm using the add bass filter, but it's basically just a peak filter. And then EQ8 to kind of get some of the mids back in. What even is this stuff? That's not even being used.
Salty macro.
Yeah, this actually looks like all this stuff is turned off. I'm not even using any of this now that I'm looking at it. So this whole thing could probably just go. Yeah, it's identical. It's not doing anything. Then mid-side OTT. That's the first bass. I knew that I wanted something organic and growly, but also really techy and futuristic. So yeah, when the drop hits, I'll get to what else I'm doing there. So this sound, oh, this is a cool one. This is where I'm using, so this sound without any processing or effects on it is pretty much just.
Is that the high 12 there, giving it that kind of...
So this wavetable actually, it's a dispersion table. This is actually included in the Serum Masterclass. I resampled these from Harmer, and they're great because it's like if you could automate disperser, gradually increasing the dispersion amount, and then also have the reverse of that on the other side of the wave. So in the very middle of this wave, it's just a regular saw wave, and it's great because you can just introduce just thickness and modulate the amount of thickness depending on the wavetable position. So I know this is hard to hear, but you can hear in different positions has a different kind of glossiness. This high filter is just kind of giving it that vocally sweep. Throw these things back on. Here we go. So if I bring this, yeah, you can hear that it's a little stiffer sounding in the beginning, in the middle, and juicier on the edges. And then the sub, bring this back. And then this is where the fun stuff happens. I love taking auto pan and just automating the amount for just little bits. In this case, it's just the beginning. It's and then with erosion, automate the erosion up, boost some top end. Now it's starting to sound good. Overdrive, auto dynamic EQ. It's just there's a little click right there. It's kind of killing it. This fat rack, I didn't make that. I'm not going to talk about that. it enhances things a little bit. And then mid-side OTT, I think that comes in at the drop. Then I think these are the only two sounds that I'm really teasing in. Oh, then it's next. This is a sound from, honestly, I could not tell you what this is from. I think it may be something, I think it may be this first growl sound, resampled.
Sounds like it was, brought up in pitch a little bit.
Yeah, what's going on here? Couldn't tell you where it's from.
That sounds like some bass that's inside your drop somewhere.
Oh, it's probably from this thing. So this is a beast. This is Phase Plant. A lot of stuff going on here. I'm gonna just go through this with everything off so we can hear what it actually sounds like in the beginning. Honestly, that's the thing. It's like I wish I remembered what my thought process was in starting out these sounds, but it's such a flow, especially with Phase Plant. I think it was just like messing around with stuff. So okay, Phase Plant. It already sounds awesome right outside of Phase Plant. And yeah, Phase Plant's amazing. What's going on here? Let me bypass this. So this is what it sounds like with pretty much no effects. This is just macros. The cool thing about Phase Plant is you can import wavetables from like Serum. So that's what I did. So I had this wavetable called Icarus Spectral, and it was just resampled from the synth Icarus. It does some pretty cool weird stuff. And then what is actually being modulated? Obviously the wavetable position is being modulated, the pitch is being modulated, doing a little envelope sweep. It would be in here, yeah, it would be. I think I decided not to use those. So yeah, I think this is just modulating the wavetable frame amount, yeah. And then I added the Faturator and then some comb filters. So just with the Faturator. Then you add the comb filters tuned to your note. So basically this is cool. You have a note modulator. So it's key track, basically. It's a key track modulator. And you just modulate that to the frequency of a comb filter. You get that tonal delay perfectly tuned. You don't have to type in 325 hertz like in Serum. It's just perfectly tuned to your note. That's what it sounds like out of Phase Plant. I had a 3-band crossover, and I'm using Morph for the mid band. Right now, you're not actually hearing, that's actually a mistake that I did. I meant to put chords here, but I didn't. So it's actually just the mid band is kind of just producing noise, but that's okay. It's kind of just filler. This EQ8, brightening it up, mid-side OTT, thickening it, taming it, cutting out some junk in there, I don't know why. And then here's a fat rack that I made, which consists of OTT, just a little bit, very short reverb, some disperser, an EQ to cut out some harshness, multiband saturator, and then a lot of these parameters are mapped to just like the fatness. So yeah, it's just really convenient to just like toss on. It's fun to make fat racks. It's just something that you just toss on kind of cool sounds and just like soup them up. It's kind of like what OTT does, but just more with some more spice, just more character. Sorry, OTT. And I think the next section is just going to be the drop. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about this. So I have this ARP, which is just the guitar ARP as from before. That little meaty trance lead going there, and the bass though. Where is the bass? Here it is. Oh yeah, we didn't talk about this one yet. Cool. Well, let's talk about it now. This bass almost killed me. Not literally, but.
Well, it killed everybody else.
This was really tough to get right. As you can see, a lot of different instruments. I tried Phase Plant, which I used some Phase Plant, used Harmor, and I tried some Operator, and I tried some Razor. And then I decided a combination of all of them kind of actually sounds the best. So the first thing that I started out with sounds like, yes, the first thing that started out with was actually this. The gritty Reese. So what I'm doing is, it's a detuned saw. It's kind of messy, but it's also kind of unique. I want to just explain what my process was. This was probably my second time actually ever using phase plant. I'm not going to deconstruct this just because I don't want to ruin the sound. I just want to kind of explain what my process was. So the cool thing about phase plant is you can pretty much route anything to anything, and you can do audio rate modulation to other oscillators parameters. So I have this detuned analog saw here. Nothing really special. Just two voices detuned, fully spread. But then I have a noise oscillator, and what's going on here is it's just white noise. I have it set to stable, so every time that I hit a note, it plays the same. It starts the white noise it's almost like a white noise sample at that point. It just stays the same, just for consistency. And then what I did was I distorted them together with a little bit of bias. I used overdrive, and then what I did was I filtered it with a low pass. So I start out with that. Add some noise. Distort them. The bias really goes a long way. This thing is so cool. That prominent, but you can really like harden things up and get them really gritty. So what's going on with this filter though is I'm using this down here. So we're not actually hearing this because there's no out. This is just I'm just using this sine wave as a modulator, and I am modulating the filter cutoff. So this is basically filter FM. And you can do this with different kind of shapes, like kind of hard to hear the difference in this case. And then at the bottom, I have just a separate sub going direct out. I also have these effects here, slice EQ for some coloration, resonator, it's not doing anything. And then just a high pass filter, so to leave room for the sub. Then lane 2 is where the sub is going out. So it's just a simple Reese, and then I was like, this is totally not going to cut it. I tried like distorting it more, and I was just thinking just some like nasty, hard sounding Reese would be it. But I was like, no, I think this needs like a blast. This needs to sound like a blaster, because I mean, imagine if it dropped like this.
Oh no. Don't take away that from me.
Boo.
It don't cut it. So that's when Blaster comes in. And this phase plant is the whole character of he is the front man of the show. And it is it's pretty simple. It's really just a wavetable that's called Break Me, that's stock in phase plant, and I love it. And it sounds like this. It's just already a nice blaster off the bat. And then distort it. Some more distortion and a little bit of filter. And that's that.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like atonal.
Yeah. It's got like, it's very like, it's resonating that flat 7th harmonic. It's kind of sounds squarified, but the top end still sounds like not squarey. Like it doesn't sound very digital.
I know what you mean. Yeah. I love that. It's so good.
It's a really cool sound. And then I was like, it needs a little bit more atonality in the top end. So this is when I layered Razor with it. It's really simple. I'm just using sync dissonance and then metal. So what that sounds like. So that's what sync dissonance does. Metal is cool because you can detune, you can basically stretch the harmonics out pretty extremely, and you can quantize them. So when you distort them, they're still going to be harmonic to each other. It's not going to sound like noise. So when I distort it with the limiter, it sounds a lot better than, it's much more stable. Combine those two. Just that extra top metallic screechiness. Yeah, basically these two combined with another operator, which I don't really, there's already sub in here, but I don't know. It works.
One thing I noticed is that it is absolutely redlining, like within the channel. But like, do you ever worry about that kind of stuff with that? Or is it with Ableton? I noticed there's like a 32-bit floating point, so it doesn't matter at that point, right? Like once you bring it all down.
I guess theoretically you could crank it so much that it exceeds the headroom of 32 bits, but I think you need to go like plus 100 something dB for it to actually clip. Yeah, in the digital space. So effectively, you really don't have to worry about that. And if you're getting anything close to that, you're probably just doing something terribly wrong, like a stack of gains, or just have some weird feedback loop going on.
If you're clipping inside of Ableton and it's below 100 and however many, you're fine.
You should be okay. Yeah, if you record something thing. If you set your settings in Ableton to 32-bit and you record something and you have it absolutely cranked, or let's say someone else sends you a 32-bit file and it looks like it's clipping, you can just bring down the volume and it will not be clipping anymore, and it won't have like any of that like embedded in the sound.
What kind of witchcraft is this?
You can, so this is something that I recently discovered. I was like, why doesn't Ableton do it? It's like it processes with 32-bit float, but why can't I record stems in 32-bit? Why do I have to like turn everything down? Turns out this was set to 24 the whole time. And as soon as I set it to 32, I was like, wow, I can have stems that are like plus 12 dB and then just turn them all down and it sounds great. No clipping.
Dude, I feel like I've cheated of a childhood not knowing that.
I think the only time that, like, I guess that solves it for me, but I was thinking the only time maybe that it would be an issue is that with using analog emulated plugins, those usually with the VU meters and everything, you want to be below 0 dB, otherwise they react like terribly, but that's the only other time.
And that's usually because they are emulating hardware, which would do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, which in a way is, you know, they're keeping it faithful to what's actually, you know, how it actually.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I use a lot of analog emulated stuff just because I like the coloration that it adds to and the depth, I guess, for like 3D-ness. But it does become a pain when you're having to put like utilities before things just to like bring the volume down and then bring it back up
Yeah.
afterwards and stuff. Yeah.
The whole trim workflow. Yeah. That's pretty much this sound. You know, is there any other sounds in here that we did not go over? Let's play it. Oh yeah, also, this is just a really tiny little just sub, basically just a sine wave. And if you put that before your kick and just have nothing else there, it really makes the kick sound bigger. Like, if I take this out, it's like it's missing something. You don't want to fill it up with too much high end, but just having just that little bit of low end, just like the little bit of like even like a low pass kick, like can give it the feeling that of like a shockwave approaching. And I really like that. The first time I heard that effect was actually in Xylan's remix of Figure 8. He has it a little bit more prominent. He has an actual mid bass that kind of like go low passes into the next like big chord. And I'm just like, whoa, that sounds so huge just from doing that. And ever since then, I've always, you know, took that inspiration from that song. And I've also been hearing a lot of other artists do it too. And so I'm like, that's cool. It's a cool effect. I'm just going to play through this drop and I'm going to see if there's anything that is like worth like really going in on. And if you have any questions about how I made anything, please just shout it out. So here we go.
There's something that sounds almost like a zip right before your like main bass comes in too.
It's these, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So this is a cool little sample. It's from I don't remember where I got the sample pack, but it's by Anemone. It's called Crunchy Clap, and I just reversed it. And then Space Debris. Let's see what it sounds like. This is actually from the effects stem from Urchin by Fractal. When I remixed that song, this was one of the effects stems, and this is what he used in the intro, and I just reversed it and found a cool little spot.
When you are thinking about like, oh, maybe I could like add a little something here, do you usually go through your old stems to find stuff, or is it like, because it seems like a lot of your stuff, you're like, oh man, this is something from like years ago, and you just go dig into a crate, or is it?
That's literally just me Control F and then just typing in a random word and then just going down and being like, ooh, what is that? And then just right clicking it and being like, whoa, this was from like 2013. Let's use it. I have all my stuff archived all the way back to 2006 when I first got Logic. And thankfully, I think it's like, I'm so glad that I backed up and saved everything that I ever made, because I don't know, for one, I'm pretty sentimental about that kind of stuff. And two, it's just really cool to like take stuff that's basically ancient history and repurpose it. And even if it's just for like half a second, I think it's a cool thing. It's like, there's a deep part of history.
And even if people don't know it, you're gonna know it, and that's gonna give it every song that you make such more meaning, I guess, to you. And people will know that now, but maybe they'll connect to it more. But that's really cool.
It's mostly a personal thing that I do, And it's also just really convenient. You know, if you have a sound that works, that you're like, okay, this is unrecognizable. This is from, you know, the archives. Let's use it. Yeah. But there's one sound that it's like a boom impact that I've used. I made it back in 2007 in a Logic project. I've been using it ever since.
Would it be in like your Elemental pack? I know you got one in there.
I think it's the one in Elemental. I did process it a little bit, but I wanted to talk about this thing, this mid band with the morph. This bass here is where I'm using morph with the chord. If you listen to these, so here's without the morph. It sounds cool, very lasery, but with the morph, you have the spirit of the chord in the bass. It's not doing anything to the low end, and it's not doing anything to the high end. So it retains its texture, but yeah, when I automate the morph on, it's just such a cool effect. You can just play any chord and the bass still sounds like a bass, and it's still bright and present, but it's like, you know, it's just incredible.
It's really cool. It's like the harmonics of the chord in the same like scale or key, but it just like adds to the bass. You can subtly hear it. It's only just in there. It adds such a bit of depth, like perception of what you actually hear, because you can hear without it sounds like a really nice lasery bass, and then as soon as you layer it with the morph in there with the chord, it almost sounds like it comes out a bit and just spreads.
Yeah, it does have stereo width in it too. That's the cool thing about morph, is like it's stereo as well. This is different than automating the sound of a chord pad in, because the sound of this chord pad, like if I bring this up, it's very fuzzy and it's full range and it's very static. When you use morph, you are taking the filter movement of the bass and imprinting it on the harmonic content of the chords, or vice versa. You can think of it. And it really sounds like its own thing. It doesn't sound like two different things. It sounds like this is one sound. And that's the reason why I have this up here, is because I'm also using this on vocals too. In the verse 2, I'll show you what I did with that. I do something similar, and it's pretty cool. I think it's might be time to move on to the next part of the drop, because we covered all the bases, I believe. Oh yeah, this little guy. This is from Elemental, just doing a pitch transposition. It's called X tripping. Not referring to... The way I have it titled, X means atonal, so not MDMA, just to be clear. This sound here is also from a bass stem from Energize. If I bring this out, you'll be able to hear that it's just a really sped up version of the bass stem. But it's just enough of that like to introduce syncopation, and kind of like it kind of functions musically as like a slap bass.
It goes really well with the bass that you have the Autopan LFO on as well. Kind of like flows into it.
So I think this is a new sound. So what I actually have going on here, there's a Ubic G. Without that, you get a little bit less metallic of a sound. This is mostly phase plant. So this wavetable is actually from Razor, that I imported from Razor number pitch bend. It sounds like, which is a pretty cool sound. And then add some noise to that. But the cool thing about this noise is I'm starting with a sine wave, and this is also seconding as a sub because it's going out to lane 2. But what you're not hearing directly, I added distortion to this. I overdrive the sine wave, so it's kind of like a square, add some bias to it. And here, if I turn off these resonators, or if I turn off that resonator, it sounds like this. It's amplitude modulated. So I'm taking the output of this and modulating it with the level of the noise. So without it. But as I increase it, we get amplitude modulated, tuned noise. And the coolest thing is the bias. Like, this is really where it shines. Like, it's such like a nice grit layer that you can just add to anything. It's just amplitude modulate wide noise. And
sounds like it was behind your head almost for a little bit too. It kind of gives it a nice width.
Really wide. I think that's what that sound was. And then harmor layer. And I'm using square wave, EQing out a lot of the low end. And I'm using the phaser on harm mode, just classic phaser on harm mode. and I just have it as a static phaser. So change the offset a little bit, turn on the harmonizer. Oh, I don't have any effects on here. The distortion must be coming from something over here. Overdrive. Overdrive combined with this. And then the Ubic G. So what's going on with the Ubic G, this is really fun. I have the grain size pretty small. I think that's I actually don't know if that's milliseconds or not, but I'm just automating the scale. And you get this weird phasery metallic comey effect. And then on my basses group, tape stop, crush. And I wanted to get the effect of kind of like this ethereal, like artificial world, which is like the basses, kind of like sucking out of the picture. And then his vocal chop, his voice coming back in is like a hint of reality, a hint of like humanness coming back into this like artificial world. And he really vibed with that when he heard it. And he was like, it coincided with his vision for the music video, where he's in the real world climbing the sand dunes, and then he's in the artificial world where it's just like, I don't really know specifically what the whole backstory is, but there's this dichotomy between like, is this reality or is this an artificial projection? And am I human or am I AI? And I think that's such a cool theme. And I think a lot of people are really vibing with that these days and really exploring like what it means. Cause like, man, now that we have virtual reality and artificial intelligence, it's like the whole concept of simulation theory, I think is resonating hard for a lot of people.
I do like this particular part of the song because you have like the contrast plays so well with each other, because you have these absolutely grimy bass lines that are hitting you right in the face. And it's just like when you said when they kind of get sucked out, and it's almost like the vocal kind of like pushes through and it's almost like lighter. It's almost like you're not, in a sense, like you drown, like you're underwater and you just like come up for that one breath of air before you get like essentially forced back down into the nitty gritty.
That is a great analogy.
Yeah, so it's and that's kind of like what a lot of bass music is about, right? It's like that inhale, exhale, the tension release, and that's the contrast that makes these sort of little snippets that much more impactful in the songs themselves than even listening to like the thought process behind them and like the feeling that you're trying to convey when you're making this. When people listen to that, and it lets them connect much more to the song itself.
It's a little bit more than just like, you know, a production technique or like
you're telling a story.
Yeah, it's storytelling at that point. Sorry. This is the cool part.
Why you gotta do that to me?
Yeah. All right. So the downbeat, I pitched down the vocal because I was like, all right, I want this to get like real in and real dark. Like, let's just go all out. And so I got this bass here. This is pretty cool. That was probably one of my favorite basses because it's not because it's like hard or anything, but just because it's like such a complex sound spectrally, like when filtered. The Serum is pretty simple. So this is what I was referring to before. This is what happens when you take a saw wave and low pass filter it over time and then resample it and then use Morph spectral zero all phases. You get phase symmetry. So basically there's no pitch drift or phase drift. So if you use this as a pluck, it's going to sound very in tune, and it looks like that. It looks totally different.
Is this what you got from Harmer?
I don't know. I don't know if I got this from Harmer or not. I think I just resampled this from Serum. Just used like a resonant low pass filter and saved it as a wavetable, and just, this was originally a preset called Owl Bass. Then I added some downsampling and got this. So without that, it's pretty much just a clean, like,
it almost sounds like something you could have got with a operator by using the envelope. Two oscillators, one envelope kind of like comes in and creates that kind of wowness. I think I've actually seen you do that in either the School of Bass or a previous episode.
You're talking about like getting that,
not the downsampling, the kind of like wow.
Oh, right. Yeah, you could do that with just two sine waves and then just amp modding the modulator. Get a pretty similar effect. So yeah, downsample, multiband compress. I also have unison too, and Oscillator 2, I think, is just introducing, this is the same as this, except squarified, same wavetable. But now we have this razor patch, which sounds really funny, like just alone. It's the comb peak filter with a LFO on saw on the phase, so it just goes. Here's without the metal or the unison. It's basically just a saw wave with the comb peak filter on it. The metal, though, using the stretch technique with the quantize, just gives it a different character. Unison noise actually sounds like it brings it up an octave. And then when you layer it with that and then do some low pass automation, then saturate. I don't know. It was just a cool like thing because I didn't want it to go straight tonic. I didn't want it to go tonic on the downbeat because I wanted to subvert expectations a little bit, especially with the vocal repitching. This part, this main bass here, some of you may already know from Instagram. Initially, this was kind of, I just had no limits. I just wanted to experiment and just see like what kind of cool new idea could I get by taking the prequel to this song, Only in a Dream, not even a stem of it, just the whole song, the mastered song. Actually, no, sorry, the pre-mastered of the song. It's PV1, this is the pre-master. Taking that drop, throwing it in here, retuning it, stretching it so it fits the BPM, and just reversing it. So this right here. So if I take this and if I reset the transposition and then reverse this and drag it out, this is what it sounds like. It's the second drop of Only in a Dream.
I feel like it's like only you could pull that off. Like, get out of here.
It's so cheap, but it's like, hey, with enough processing on it and some other layers, it sounds pretty cool. I mean, personally, I'm not even really that stoked of how it sounds. I think it sounds kind of messy, but people really seem to dig the sound of this part. I think because it's just like really bold.
It's also a wall of sound, and then I think it's unexpected from section A, quote unquote, and then they're expecting something to kind of like go with that, and then you're kind of hyped up, and then it just throws you for a loop because you just get like even deeper into the song. I think that's where it really like shines.
I think so. It subverts expectations on multiple levels, like not just musically, but also like my approach to it. It's like, I didn't expect to do something like this myself. Only in a Dream. Processing I'm using Soothe to cut out some harsh guys. This crossover is actually not doing anything. I was experimenting with using Morph with that chord, but didn't really cut it. I do a little bit of that in the next section, but I think that's a resample. I'm using a multiband saturator just to make it even more noisy and more of a wall of sound. Really cranking that sub and then cutting out the sides and then mid-side OTT, and that's pretty much that. I do have 2 layers going on with this though. This is one of the layers because this is just very fuzzy. It's huge, but it's fuzzy, and I knew that it needed more of a top end. So something that I did was this is actually done with wavetable. So it sounds kind of messy. This original sample is from a sample pack from a long time ago. It's a sample pack by this artist named Mako. And no, it's not the vocalist Mako. This guy made melodic neuro dubstep back in like 2011, 2012. And he's not very well known. This last song that he ever did officially was a collab with Protostar released on Monstercat called No Fire. It's amazing. You should check it out. He's a sound design wizard. Unfortunately, he stopped making bass music. But before he did that, he released a sample pack. And there's this one song that he has called Germination. When I first heard this song, I almost puked. Like, I actually felt nauseous because the sound design was so visceral and it excited me so much. It excited me so much. I actually had to pause it and then start it over and be like, okay, let's do this again. I love the song so much, but he actually took a snippet of the bass from that drop, and it's just so gnarly, and it sounds like this. Obviously, it's not that impressive, but the way he processed it, you got to check out the song. It's amazing. It has like this woody kind of vocally mouthy sound that it sounds like granular, but it sounds real. It's weird. And so I just threw that into wavetable, and I was like, it needs some kind of grit like that. So it kind of has that same tonality to it. And I just kind of scrubbed through the wavetable and figured out like a good wavetable position. I'm using Serum effects to widen it out even more, I guess. 3-band crossover. I'm vocoding the mid-band to make it sound like more juicy. Just setting it to modulator. Mid-side OTT. There we go. EQ8, and then some saturation. And then combined, it gives it that super wide but like crispy, more phase coherent top end. And then this is a bass stem, bass design jam that I use Morph with. I think it was like a ton of OTTs and vocoders, and then I morphed it with something else. I really don't know, but I call it musical modem. And there's just, it's just really fun, like little glitchy bits.
What? That's so cool.
And I layered that together. It kind of brings back the technological cybernetic aspect to it. It's very subtle, but you can kind of hear it in the background. So yeah, that's pretty much that section. This Razor Scream table, this is an old sound, originally from Follow You VIP. I made this, something that sounded like this. Yeah, it's a sound in the drop of Follow You VIP. I turned that into a wavetable and then repitched it. Just added like a fade. Yeah, just made it, a little metallic stabby guy. Also, this is from Activate, this little bit right here. Pretty much just not doing anything to it besides transposing it down one. When this progression changes, this is where I use the morph, I believe. This is where morph comes in. So that's the sound of morphing those chords with the bass again. To be fair, there's nothing new in that section. It's all just the same stuff that I covered over here with just a little bit of variations. And then this last part of the drop is not really that complicated. It's pretty much like the main drop of Only in a Dream. We have one bass, which is just a distorted harmor and operator sub layer. The harmor isn't really doing anything special. I think I just randomly drew in the harmonic phases. Looks like it's randomly I drew it in, yeah. Harmonizer. Some unison, so it's really boring. But I kind of wanted that messiness. And then Serum effects, I don't think is actually doing much. Yep, it's just adding more width, I guess. And then high pass, and then just a operator sine wave sub. But like, it doesn't really sound that good. But with the chords, it sounds pretty full. And these chords is a new technique that I've been using. So right here, we got the Gladiator chords from before, but on top of that, I'm also using a different chord voicing. I'm using wavetable. But here's the thing, I'm not using regular unison, I'm using noise unison. So classic unison would sound like this. Definitely has a detuny kind of phasey sound, but noise though, it's like the spirit mode in Gladiator if you set it to white noise.
I've been looking for this everywhere because I couldn't shell out the money for Gladiator to get that.
Dude, yeah, you could just make it in here. Like, if I change the amount, you can really hear how dramatic you can get it. It's like a swarm of angry bees.
I love that, yeah. That's actually one of my particularly favorite things about your chords in general or like your saw stacks. And like, I know it was really nice when you had it in the School of Bass, you're showing how that could be achieved. I was like, man, I wish I could get that. Like, it's just such a good tonality in a saw stack.
Yeah, I mean, the operator method kind of cuts it, but it's really hard to get it right. This just does it automatically. I mean, I think, yeah, even with two voices. But yeah, so there you go. We'll combine these two. And then add the bass back in. The tubular bells. The square arp. And these vocals, how I'm processing these vocals now, this is where, oh yeah, the exciter is on, I guess it's the same as before on this part. However, how I got these vocals to really cut through, I put a track spacer on the sidechain bus to the vocals. So. It's subtle, but it's enough for the vocals to have clarity throughout.
Yeah, track space is amazing for that. Yeah, it is like a game changer if you're, especially for like, I was gonna ask, you have such a dense mix because there's so many elements all playing together. So like getting something like a vocal, which is like mid-high to like high-heavy, and it's just like gonna get eaten unless you put something like that on it.
Did you know that you can do that with Soothe? If you have Soothe,
yeah,
you can
sidechain now,
and it's really precise. Like it's more precise than track spacer. However, that said, you don't really, if you're making space, you don't really need to have like, you know, super thin bands that are being cut out to make space, but you can if you want to, and you can get some cool effects using Soothe. I mean, just make sure you have your oversampling up so you don't get artifacts, but
no aliasing. I was gonna ask you for a question about that. What do you ever find that you have like struggles with that, having so many elements in a mix like that, like very dense? You have a lot of things that are competing for each other. Like what kind of tactics do you use in terms to like tame that so that everything because everything does seem to have its own space. The vocals always cut through. Obviously, like side chaining with your kick and your snare, that's like cutting everything out. Things that are like fighting, I guess, in terms of like in the more mono area of the songs, and like then you have your synths that are super wide. Like, do you ever find like you have a lot of trouble with that, like come mix time? Or
that is it definitely is a tough thing, because I mean, even this section, it looks like it's pretty minimal. There's not much going on. Everything is kind of fighting for the forefront.
I guess it just kind of gets chopped down to stylistic choices, and you're gonna sacrifice certain things, I guess.
That's it. It's learning to be okay with sacrificing certain things, like the mids in these chords. Obviously, that sounds much more wholesome when it's solo, but does it make sense too? But in reality, really, what I'm getting out of these chords is more the top end and less of the vocally mid range. So that's why I have these cut. I mean, that's just one example. It's not really going to make that much of a difference if I bypass it, but it's a lot of those things just added up that make the difference. I think one thing is like with EQ masking, it's probably the biggest thing. EQ masking and using limiters and sometimes clippers to just make sure that you're not removing headroom from more important elements, but is to kind of prioritize what are the most important sounds that you want to function in the forefront. Like chords, if there's a vocal going on, they shouldn't be front and center. They should be kind of off to the side. They should be like the choir supporting the front man. And same with basses too. I would say if you have basses with heavy mid basses with vocals, you're gonna have to sacrifice something in order for, if you want the vocals to be prominent, you're gonna have to sacrifice something, and that's just the reality of it. And we just talked about it, but track spacer and sidechaining with Soothe they're game changers. And it's really awesome that we have those plugins today, because it's like you can make it super transparent and you're like, wait, how is all this stuff stacking up simultaneously? And I can still hear everything. And it's also sound selection too. Like sounds that are like very chorusy versus sounds that are very noisy versus sounds that are like dry and harsh versus sounds that are like juicy and thick. You don't really want any of those categories you don't want multiple sounds that are in one of those categories. If you're gonna have multiple sounds, you kind of want them to be separate in those textural categories. Because we were just talking about like the spectral, or I guess the timbral aspect of it, but like the movement and the texture, which is where like the phase characteristics of sound really comes in. And if you can identify if you could identify the textures of the sounds and categorize them, that's just another level of prioritization and categorization that you can use to ensure that you're not getting conflicting textures as well as conflicting timbres. So we're pretty much halfway done. Yeah, pretty much covered how all the instruments work, and then the rest I'm just gonna kind of go through this midsection here. Proceeding. Oh yeah, also these breaks here. Originally, I was just gonna have it go out of the drop into the verse, just like going from like, let's see if I could pull it off. But after a 3-part drop like that, there needs breathing room. Even if there's like an instrumental part, before it went into the harmonic part like this, where the chord progression reestablishes, we needed a 2-part break. It just did not sound right without that. And sometimes that's okay to do, to break the, I guess, metric symmetry, you know, to break the multiple of 4. Sometimes you need those breaks, and that's okay to do. If it was 1 bar, probably wouldn't work, but 2 bars, you're probably safe. It just needed that to like cool the energy. And back in this section with Nytrix stems. So we got some cool stuff going on here. I have this reverse bell layer, which is just a super stretched out and reversed clip. I don't even recall what this is from. Stretch it out, reverse it, and you just get this cool ambience layer that fits in with the song. Very dreamy layer. And this part is just supposed to be just super, super chill and dreamy until the second part of the verse where it's just like emotionally impactful. Let's see what this wavetable is doing. Oh yeah, these are also the noise chords too. Yeah, I got the action strikes. Ooh, huge impact. Yeah. Yeah, this opens up. The filter opens up on this. And I have... There's something else going on here. Yeah, this is where the only time my strings come in. Orchestral essentials. Strings arco. Keys. That's probably my favorite part. Besides, you know, heavy drops. It's just, it's one of my favorite like emotional parts of a song that I've made in a very long time, I think. So this part, check this out. These vocals here, I've seen a lot of comments where people are like mentioning, like I've heard people say that bass really blends well with the vocal. And that's because I'm actually morphing the vocal with this. So this Serum patch, going back to this isn't actually just a regular detuned saw wave. This is the dispersed saw wave. So with those low notes, you can't hear it in the high notes, but if I play like really low note, it sounds very dispersed. It has like that glossy, like laseriness to it. I am using the morph on so I'm doing something kind of crazy here with this mill scale thing. I'll explain in a bit. But yeah, it's just the morph. Sounds so cool. So this, for some reason, I couldn't really get the morphed part to like be super steady. So I did this really kind of dumb thing. I created a Mel scale OTT. And what Mel scale is, it's a frequency scale like linear or logarithmic, but it is based off of, it's not mathematical, it's based off of human perception. And there's this plugin called Newfangled Equivocate, which is an EQ that you can basically, it has a filter bank in it where you can boost and cut gains of bands that are divided in the Mel scales. So this is a perceptive pitch distribution. That's what the Mel scale is. Like, I don't really know how to describe it any better than that. I made this a long time ago and never really found a use for it. I'm like, maybe I'll need an OTT that has a more of a like a perceptively divided frequency spectrum. And so that's where this comes in. As you can see, it's kind of arbitrary. It's like 20K at the top, 11K, 5.9K, 3K, 1.4K, 531, and 0. But if you listen to these separately, they all sound like they kind of take up the same frequency space, but in evenly distributed ranges. And that's just a psychoacoustic. It's basically just a psychoacoustic multiband compressor. That's what that is. And I use that. I really don't know if it was necessary, but I use that to make that the morphed vocal just sound really present. And I think it kind of works.
I'm always in a nightmare without you.
And then after that, it goes back into the chords.
Without you, I'm always in a nightmare without you. The fear will never end.
So that's that. And then the next part is kinda, it's mostly just a copy paste. I'm gonna be honest. I tried other things. I have this, oh man, I don't know if I want to play what I think this is in this scrapyard. I'm gonna play it. I have no idea what this is gonna sound like. Okay, so this was kind of a sketch pile of me trying to figure out if I can combine the middle drop of the first drop with the first part of the first drop. Didn't really think that worked out too well. And then I think I tried like a 4 on the floor thing, and I'm like, just some other bass. Yeah, that's just, it just didn't cut it. So I decided to do a copy paste and then do kind of like a fake out drop, but like make that blaster sound just like really intense. And how I did that was, so this was the rendered bass stem from the first part with Ubik G. I'm changing the frequency, I'm actually inverting the scale. So without it, it just sounds like the first one. And then I combine that with the Razor Scream table that we talked about earlier. This scream table I've also been using in a lot of songs. I've used it in Infinite Wings, I've used it in Stargate, Follow You, VIP, and now this one. So it's come a long way. And then combined with the Ubik G, it's just such a like brutal scream layer.
It gives it good movement for sure.
It kind of just, it's a variation of this first drop. As you can see, this is a rendered bass stem, and my workflow is pretty much just like, let's just work with audio because CPU is not having a good time if I add anything else. It's cool though, because then I could just like transpose a couple different things, like this sound. It was originally this. It followed the original progression, but I wanted it to follow, instead of like a 6-7-1 progression, I wanted it to be a 3-4-1 progression. So just transpose it up 7 semitones and then tune the grain size so it matches the pitch. This is such a finicky thing. I wish this grain size was not such an arbitrary number, because it would be really nice to just conveniently be like, or like hertz, or yeah, if it was in hertz, or if it was like even milliseconds would be a little more forgiving, but gotta do it by ear, because if it's a little bit off, it's like, and that takes a lot of time. But I mean, everything else is pretty much the same as the first drop. I don't know. I think if I would have done something differently, it would have been probably introduce another sound in this middle section and maybe do another fake out drop in the middle section. I don't know. I think I personally feel like it's a little bit tiring near the end, but we're already going over the 100% mark with like all of the stuff we're doing. So it's just like, why not? Let's just make another 6.5 minute long thing.
It is long. I think you did make the right choice though, because I think people would have that, like, the first drop is just so good. It's so good. Like changing it up even more, like just for the sake of like trying to stay creative and whatnot. Like, I don't know, maybe it might have not been as well received in that sort of sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's so much variation in that first drop. It's enough to like continue on. And then with that, people are already like connected to that first drop, and then they can connect to the second drop even more because they know what's kind of coming, even though there is a little bit of variation in there.
I totally agree with you. The compulsion to not do a copy paste kind of thing is very real, especially with that idea, especially in the producer community, is kind of like controversial. But it's hard to do this. But if you can take a step back and see and ask yourself, does this really need to have anything new? Is it really calling for anything new? And if the answer is no, then you may as well just do the copy paste drop. That just musically, it just makes more sense for the composition as a whole. And there are a lot of songs that I've heard, and I'd say that some of mine do that too. Like there's a completely different or like heavily varied second drop just for the sake of it not sounding like the first drop, and it's kind of pointless.
What's up, DAW Nation? Did you enjoy that? Did you learn a lot? First off, if you liked this episode, please hit that like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Please leave a comment down below. We would love to hear from you. In fact, we want to keep making this series better. So if there's things that we can do to make the series better, please comment below. We'd love to hear from you. If there's things in this episode that really resonated with you, please comment below, because then we can talk about more of those things in the future. Or if you have suggestions on who you want to come on In The DAW, we would love to hear from that as well. So go ahead and comment below. We'd love to hear about those things. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning, this week's episode of In The DAW is sponsored by the Serum Masterclass. Man, if you want to learn every single thing inside of Serum, from someone who actually knows what they're talking about, from Au5, right? He's gonna explain everything, every knob, every button, every menu, everything. No stone is unturned. You wanna learn every single thing inside of Serum and truly make it a tool for you to be able to create whatever you want, do crazy things. If you want that confidence with Serum, then the Serum Masterclass is for you. We also talk about a bunch of advanced techniques. There's a bunch of bonuses with it. Oh my goodness, there's so much that you can do with this Masterclass, all right? So if you want it, that's beautiful. Go ahead, click the link in the description right now. It'll take you to the Serum Masterclass. Also, you can just head on over to dawnation.net and check it out over there. It's absolutely beautiful. Also, if you're interested not only in the technical side of music production, but the emotional, philosophical, and business side of music, you should totally check out our series called Behind the DAW. All right, that focuses more on those subjects, not necessarily the technical side, the emotional, philosophical, business side. We have a series called Behind the DAW. Now you can find that over here on the DAW Nation YouTube channel or on the DAW Nation podcast if you're listening through the podcast right now. So you can find that over there. The purple episodes are Behind the DAW, green episodes are In The DAW. Very easy to see, but if you're interested in that, you can find those over there. But DAW Nation, with all that said, with all that out of the way, thank you so much for coming through and checking out this week's episode of In The DAW, and we'd highly encourage you to come back for our next episode of In The DAW or Behind the DAW. We'd love to see you over there. So go ahead and make sure to subscribe so that you know when we put out new episodes, or follow, or whatever is appropriate on the particular platform that you're listening on, okay? So with that being said, DAW Nation, we love you. Thank you so much for coming through, and we'll see you on our next episode.